Welcome to Emotionally Baked, where emotions and baking are the two most perfect ingredients. Hello, and welcome back to Emotionally Baked, your interactive podcast where we talk about our emotions, what we're feeling, and all the things through storytelling and conversation, all while baking our cares away. Hi, and welcome. I'm your host, Heather. Thank you for joining me again. Today, I thought we'd do a little eggless chocolate cake because I'm feeling all the things. All the things. So, I have my ingredients here. I'll link the website. I got it from minimalistbaker.com. This was one of the first cakes that I kind of got under my belt when I was first making things without eggs. Clearly now, I'm a chicken mom. I do have eggs. But back in the day when I was eating things without eggs, this was one of my first recipes that I loved making. I could make it into cupcakes, a regular big large cake, a sheet cake, several different things, and I just love it, and it really sticks together well. So this is like a tried and true one, not one that I'm toying with or playing with, like a new one. I totally love this recipe. I've made it for many, many years. So I got all my ingredients out here. Got my flour, sugar, salt, baking powder, baking soda. Got my oil, my soy milk. I have vanilla and my apple cider vinegar, applesauce, and I've got some coffee. This cake does have coffee in it. I don't actually know what the coffee is doing because I never can taste the coffee in this cake. But before we get started, let me go ahead and throw my hair up and then we'll get chatting. So, the empath in me, hence the title, empathy in my eggless chocolate cake. The empath in me is going very strong lately. Empathy is quite a thing. When you can relate to another person and their feelings. Being an empath is, which I think I am. I've kind of been self-analyzing myself over the years. And if you follow me on social media, you'll know that I talk about this a lot on my social media from time to time. Or what you'll see is that I will get on my social media. I'll be talking, chatting, having fun. Something will happen, whether it's in the world, whether it's in my life, personally, and I will immediately take on the emotions of whatever's happening. And essentially, it is such a weird thing being an empath in the world that I feel like we all live in. I feel like empathy is so important just on a general tone. If you've experienced something and if somebody has, you have a mutual shared experience, to be empathetic toward a person and to be understanding of what they're going through is so important. Sometimes though, I feel like when my empathic sides come out, or side, that's weird. My empathic side comes out. I feel like sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I am going to pause a second. I am going to sift this. I remember talking about this before, where sifting to me is super important when you're dealing with things like flour. So I got my 2 cups of flour, and I'm going to put my baking soda and my baking powder in here. I have birds, can you tell? They are super happy right now. Those are other birds. Obviously, they're not chickens. So I'm going to put in my teaspoon of baking powder, right? Sometimes I have gotten that mixed up. I will not lie. I will look at a recipe and I will say, whoops, that was supposed to be baking soda, baking powder. But anyways, when I do have this in a recipe, and I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of the baking soda. When I do have it in a recipe, I do like to sift it because you don't like that flavor. Like you get a chunk of like baking soda or baking powder that hasn't been fully, sifted. It's so sour. I don't. I'll have to tell you a story one time about my breakfast pancake fail. I'll save that for when I'll do pancakes on here. I'll save that for them. It was awful. Let's just say it was awful. There was a whole bunch of errors in that recipe, and it wasn't because I wasn't following the recipe. It was because just all the things happened. Now I hate this pouring of the salt into this little teeny thing, and I know I should probably have something better because I spilled a whole bunch, but it is what it is. So I think the reason why we put vinegar into the soy milk is to kind of make it like buttermilk, because it's kind of going to curl it up. Vinegar's going to curl, and it will curdle. It will do that to soy milk. I've never had an issue with it not working. Knock on wood, hopefully it will be fine. So I'm going to put that in here. Ooh, there was some baking soda still left on my teaspoon. It bubbled. A little chemistry experiment. So, and I'm going to get my coffee soon so I can do a little coffee chat and wait for this to curdle. So it's going to sit here for a minute. It's going to curdle while we chat. So, let's see how I can explain empathy or being an empath in my life, or how it looks in my life. So, as we chat, let me grab my coffee. I do coffee with like an instant coffee and just boiling water on the stove. And it said to brew a cup of strong coffee. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my stir spoon, and I'm supposed to have a half a cup of coffee in my recipe, so I'll only be making half a cup for myself. So let's see, how can I do this? This will be my mixing bowl for today. This is, I think I showed this before, but this is my favorite mixing bowl. This is my husband's grandmother's mixing bowl, which I absolutely love. I don't know what the magic is with it. It's just amazing. So I'm going to pour my oil in here, which was like 2/3 cup of oil, so that I can pour my coffee. Woo. And half a cup of coffee in my oil. And we'll let that set aside. And now that I've made a huge mess in front of me, which is fine, we'll drink coffee and we'll talk about empathy, being an empath. So, my empathetic nature has got me quite flustered at times. I know that when there's things, I just naturally know now that when there's things happening in the world, major big things get me, as do small things in my life. So if it's a small thing, if it's just a teenager being a teenager in my household, whether it's my, whatever is happening, like I will take on, or I didn't realize I was doing it, and I can't actually pinpoint. If I look back at my story, can I look back at my stories on Instagram? I don't know if it saves it that long. interesting. We should look. I do remember one time when I was like working through my thoughts on Instagram on a stories, and I was finally realizing that that's what was happening. That I just, like, because I feel like any normal human being, when something happens in the world, whether it's a tragedy has happened, or big news or big things, like, we do have emotions about it. I think any normal human being will have emotions about things that are happening in the world, whether they're positive emotions, negative, heated emotions, not so heated emotions, or if they're angry, all the things. We'll have some emotion about what's happening, which is normal, and then it goes away. Like, we'll get really, impassioned by something, and then we move on. Hopefully, we move on to the next thing. And I was working through talking about this one situation, and I feel like there was a school something bad that happened, and while I have school-age children, and it just kind of like brought up tons of emotional things. And at least this is one instance. I don't know if this was the first time that I realized it, but as I was working through that, as I was talking to the camera, talking to whoever would listen, it was evident to me that I was not just processing the information of what we were seeing on the news, what was happening, but I was spending days with it. Like, it wasn't just, I'm so angry that this happened, and how could this happen, and what can we do to help our school, and help kids, and help, like, what can we do? That initially, yes. And then my feelings just stayed with me. Not those particular feelings, but just this, like, I put myself into the parents' shoes who received bad news about their child, who had children at a school that this, something bad was happening to. And it wasn't, I feel, even though empathy can be great and good, and even like a special thing to have empathy with somebody else, I do feel like sometimes, at least in my case, it got dangerous, because I would spend days in an emotion. I would spend days in a wallow of the, what if this, not only what if this happened to me, because I did have school-age children, but actually taking and feeling and almost trying to get myself to feel the way those people were feeling subconsciously. And it was quite dangerous, I think, to start to dig a place in myself, to kind of just sit in an emotional state that wasn't mine, but that I was creating false, like, this was a false, like, not that it was false, but just that it wasn't my experience, but yet I was trying to almost create this in my head, like, this is my situation, or this more than it could be my situation, that this is going to happen to me tomorrow, or next week, or next month, and simply blowing that out of proportion, those feelings and those emotions completely out of proportion. Even now, thinking about it, it's just, I look back and I think, oh my goodness, like, so while empathy can be so wonderful, it can also be so not wonderful, especially if you're a person like myself, because because maybe this is not such a great thing, but I do suffer from anxiety and depression, which we'll get into, particularly how all that stirred up in my life. I wasn't always anxious and depressed. There were things that triggered it and brought it on in my adult life. And having that anxiety and depression mixed with empathic feelings toward things that are happening can really impact those other things. Which is why I'm saying it might not have been, it might still not be the best thing for me to take on so many emotions, varying emotions of what's happening around, because the adverse effects, we have to think about what adverse effects is it going to have on me. Are the effects going to be adverse, or are they going to be positive, in that situation? Okay, so let's keep talking about it. But we are going to start mixing, because I think my vinegar mixture is quite the curdled mess. You can see it's kind of like, ooh. So we're going to pour that into our coffee and our oil. So this is our wet mixtures. And I'm also going to put in applesauce. That's why we're not using eggs. We're using applesauce. I haven't taken one sip of my coffee. I always love a pretty cup, right? I love a pretty cup. So we're going to put in the applesauce in here. We're going to mix this into like a slurry before we put in... I didn't put in... Look, I'm trying to make an eggless chocolate cake, and I don't have my cocoa powder out here. I'm going to put my sugar in. My feelings on sugar is that it can be equally... I know this is I don't know if it's controversial. Sometimes I put it right into the wet ingredients, and sometimes I sift it with the dry ingredients. I have done it both ways, and I've never had a problem. So I'm just going to put the sugar in here. Ooh. That's a fun sound. Hopefully you could hear that. That was kind of fun. I'm going to whisk this just to kind of dissolve the sugar and everything in here. So I'm going to add, I believe it's a cup and some change of applesauce. It's like a cup and a quarter of applesauce into this mixture. Yes. Okay. So I gotta get my applesauce. I've got to sift my cocoa powder. See, that's another thing. Cocoa powder would be good to sift, because it could get lumpy. So I'm gonna put that in my dry ingredients. So I'm gonna do a cup. I only think I have a cup and a quarter. It was meant to be that I would make applesauce today. Not that I would make chocolate cake. Not that I would make applesauce. Even though I have made applesauce before, I actually have a vintage applesauce maker from my husband's grandmother. She had everything, like literally everything in this house. Again, we live in my husband's grandparents' home that his grandparents built with my husband's parents. Like, they built it. It was like one of those things that so crazy. It was one of those houses you bought from a catalog, and they shipped everything to you, came in on a big semi truck, and they bought this land. They built the house with their plans and with, all the materials that they had. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Which is why we live here. We didn't want the house to be sold after Grandma and Grandpa passed. So we took over the lease, and I'm so glad we did. And she had like everything. She was a great cook. She was a teacher. She sewed. She collected. The things that this house has held for us and like we've come across is insane. So I am gonna sift. Ooh, I gotta get my cocoa powder. So while I get my cocoa powder, you'll probably just hear some music for right now because I'm gonna sift the the dry ingredients into here, and you don't want to hear that. And that would be way too loud. So you'll see me buzzing around, getting my cocoa powder, my dry ingredients. For those of you just listening, you'll hear some pretty music. So hold on. And we're back. So this cake is very full in my bowl. It's very full. So hopefully I edited that properly so that you do not hear the noise of the sifter. And I didn't have enough cocoa powder, so we're gonna see how the texture is. If I don't think the texture is correct, I may add a little bit more flour. We shall see. So anyways, on the topic of, and I am just whisking this until I don't see any more of the floury bits and stuff. So on the topic of empathy lately, if you are living under a rock or, no, I'm just kidding. 2025, whew, has started out some way, you know? It has started out quite the way. And there's just so many, I feel like, and if you are an empath like myself, it can be very overwhelming when the events, especially world events, and the events in your life are stacking up like a Jenga tower. And any one of those pieces can just slip and happen, and everything can just make you feel all at once. And I will say lately, I have been feeling all too much all at once. It is something right now. It is something. And I know, you know, there's people in my life who are going through things. There's people in the world going through things, all the things. And I just, now, okay, let's see, this is a little runny for me, just a little bit. This recipe actually is pretty runny. It's not as dark as it usually is because I usually do have a lot more cocoa powder. I'm just debating how to, it's not a fix, it's just, if you think about it, you're supposed to have a cup of cocoa powder and 2 cups of flour. So that's the dry ingredients basically in the recipe. You got your little baking soda, baking powder, but so it's essentially 3 cups of the substantial dry ingredients. So if I only put 2.5 cups in, even maybe only like 2 1/4, there's a little bit missing to it, and it's not going to be, the cake is not going to be what it should be. So I think I don't want it to, the problem is making it too floury. I don't know. So I might just put in maybe just a 1/2 cup of flour. I think that's what I'll do. Yes. Okay. So on to our thoughts again. As we go into our adding of flour, I will say or I will try to say, that I'm feeling currently overwhelmed. I did not sift that. Well, we shall see how it goes. I am living on the edge. I'm not sifting. We will whisk it enough to hopefully not have chunks of flour in our cake. So, being an empath in this day and age, and I'm still grateful that I can be empathetic and have, feelings in regards to what my friends or family are going through, people in the world. But I'm noticing the more and more I have to kind of break up these flour chunks. The more and more I'm just noticing that the empath path, does that make sense? The empath route that I take with certain things, and that I pile on emotional state after emotional state of feeling, either from what a friend is feeling, or from what a story that I read online, what it's making me feel, or which is dangerous. I need to try and stay away from. Now this might not look, but it is a little bit thicker, which is what I'm going for. It's not as dark as of a chocolate cake, but I think it'll do. I think it will do. So what I'm gonna do is I make this into just a round or cupcakes. I thought it would be fun to do a bundt pan. Bundt pans are fun. The only problem is sometimes they don't come out, and that does worry me. But we're gonna just fill this up all the way, and I think that's why I love this bowl, because it has a spout. And I just love it, and everything can just scoop right easily out. So this is gonna go in the oven for about 25 to 40 minutes. I'm not gonna make you wait that long to see the end result. We'll see it at the end of this. So let us pause for a second and get this all in the oven. All right, so we have our cake in the oven. Actually, I'm preheating the oven because I forgot to do that. So it'll be in there for a minute, and I'll bring it back out at the end. So empathy is so interesting for me to try to explain when it's something I feel I didn't have a label for like a really long time. I remember and I think it has grown. The empath part of me has grown definitely over the years with my anxiety. I don't know if they go hand in hand. Is there such a thing called empathic anxiety, or the anxiety of an empath? If not, let's make it. No, that's not. But I feel there is some sort of connection between feeling so much, feeling an emotion so much, so intensely, and feeling for someone, situation so intensely that it starts to alter your own perception of what is directly happening to you, making it so that you build the effects of of that situation, of what that situation would actually cause. So let me use, I'm trying to think of an example of where this came across with me in the last couple of years again. And I think a lot of the examples I do have are with my kids. I think it's natural when you have people to take care of, or even, pets. You have something that is your responsibility, whether you have a house that you're responsible for, pets that you're responsible for, children that you're responsible for. Maybe you're responsible for a sibling or other family members. I think that's empathy starts to or when there's situations that you hear or come across that you can immediately be empathetic towards. Oh, that happened to this family, or this person, or this person's pet, this person's house, this person's kids, this person's family, this person's. You immediately, I feel like, gravitate towards a situation that you can, in your brain, kind of connect with on that human level and say, I am so sorry. I can, I have a dog too, and my dog's getting older, and I can empathize with the feeling of, an older pet and what a person's going through. Or I have a child in college. I have a child in high school. I have a child in elementary school. So when things happen either at the collegiate level or the academy level or the elementary level, there's certain things that you pick out and you say, okay, I can feel that, or I can empathize with that. I think we tend to, or at least I tend to, pull towards, things that are common. So we can have, I think empathy creates relationship where we can connect with other people. If I have a shared experience, if I have a shared commonality, if I have a shared sense of what's happening, to not make the world seem so vast and huge and large, we can empathize with each other on things if they're, these common things. And once we get to those common things and we start to empathize with people about these common, factors that we share, I do essentially believe it's healthy. But I do feel like there is a line between healthy and then switching that to, now I'm going to, and that's why I'm saying there could be and I don't know what it's called. Maybe I just haven't heard of it. So if anybody's heard of it, where your anxiety, like a newfound anxiety, comes from your empathy. So I'm empathetic towards the situation because I had a lot of it is a lot of situations that I've experienced in the past has been because of school situations that have been pretty scary around my area, in the country, in the world. And you, as a parent of children in every level of school, there's an immediate fear. So you start the empathetic feelings because, my oven is preheated. We shall put our cake in the oven. The only bad thing about taking a break to put your cake in the oven is you lose your train of thought. But that's just like me. I often lose my train of thought or it skips around. So that's going to bake for, it said, the recipe said 25 to 40 minutes. That's a big range. So I think I'm going to check it at like 30. We'll see. We'll see what is happening at 30. So, oh, I remember. So the anxiousness that comes from feeling the empathy, it has to be called something. I mean, not delusion. I don't know. I have to look it up. I have to look up and see what that could be called. And that's where I feel like empathy can become dangerous, where you feel so much for a situation. You feel so much for individuals who are going through an experience that you can easily be experiencing yourself. And so like there was something that did happen at my daughter's school when she was in high school, and so I had the empathetic feelings. I could very much say I've been there, I've experienced it, I've gotten the phone call, I've gotten the information from the school that says we're locking down, something's happening. And so I had that empathetic shared feeling with other people who had gone through the same thing, because you are currently experiencing it. And then instead of walking through that experience and just waiting, and the waiting is hard. I will say the waiting of that experience is hard, and everything ended up being okay. My daughter was okay. Everybody in the school was okay, which was a huge sigh of relief and thankfulness. And then I felt myself spiraling. So like the empathetic, I know I've experienced now what other families have gone through in these situations that didn't turn out the best. Mine, thankfully, turned out okay. And then the empathy stretched itself into a form of anxiety and almost I want to say, my brain started believing that it didn't all turn out well, that something must have happened, or the outcome I wasn't believing what the outcome was. And it was creating, even though my daughter texted me and said everything was okay and everything was fine and all the things, and my anxiety then took over. So the empath was there, and then my anxiety took control, and it skyrocketed everything. And I think it just, so I'm kind of wanting for my own self is to figure out, what is that when you're being understanding, you're empathetic towards a situation is here. Your anxiety is here too. For me, my anxiety, I feel like, is always a stagnant, slow, just, how do I call it? I'll have to explain my anxiety one time. That's a whole nother, what can I make with that? That's a whole nother topic of conversation. But when the two come together and then one elevates the other, or vice versa, I'm not quite sure how it works in the situation, or what I would say it's how it's working in the situation. The sun is coming in at a very right angle this direction. I might have to turn a little bit. Woo. It just creates, I think, with me at least, it creates more danger than good for myself personally. And I'm really trying to figure out how to balance my empathy and anxiety, and making sure that one doesn't overpower the other. I should take a note here just to say I am not, and these are all my opinion, and I am definitely not a professional by any means, a medical professional or any way. I'm just theorizing and thinking upon my situations and what I'm going through, hence why we're here. So I just feel this is just, empathy is such an interesting topic. Like I said before, it's just so, I don't even sometimes know how to categorize it in my life. I would want somebody to be empathetic towards something that I was going through. And even sympathy. Sympathy's great. Ooh, that's a nice little catch of the sun. I love when people are sympathetic toward a situation. I love when people are empathetic toward a situation. When they say, I've been there as well, and especially helping a situation. Let's turn a little bit. That afternoon sun. And yeah, I think the hard part is managing managing the two emotions that seem to come together for me. So, and as relating to it is now, there is a lot of emotional things, situations, topics that are going on. And just not only in general in the world around us, but in my own life, that I need to be careful. I need to be careful with how I'm feeling, and making sure that I'm not taking on too many of other people's emotions or what they're experiencing to an extreme, to where it gets me to where it adversely affects myself. And I'm giving myself a self-talk here. So we are going to enjoy some eggless chocolate cake tonight as we sit with our feelings of empathy, and just making sure to regulate. And I am trying to come up with a solution right now as I speak for myself. I am trying to slowly think upon the things that are, it is what it is, and to be empathetic where I can be, where it's most beneficial, and to slowly monitor those feelings, and to make sure that I'm not letting them collide with any anxiety that I would feel toward that situation. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I will show you, and hopefully I will be putting pictures here of the beautiful cake when it's finished. I'm going to melt some chocolate on, and just kind of drizzle that on top, just to kind of give it some sort of, can I move? to give it some sort of topping, I like just a good plain chocolate cake. I think it's soothing and it goes with everything, and if you just want to, you can add ice cream to it. You don't have to add anything to it. It's perfect. So that hopefully, and everybody else will enjoy it as well, and my family, because it is going to dinner tonight. So there we go. All right, friends, thank you so much for coming and joining me in this discussion of empathy as we made our eggless cake. And just remember that whether the salt in our recipe comes from our tears or a teaspoon, just remember we baked it out. Love ya. Bye.